catch up, and so there's a little bit of a. Okay, I think we are live. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to our 8th town hall meeting, and we are entering in. I think this is like the 7th week of classes for Reskill Americans, and so I know there's a lot of people doing a lot of work in different projects and areas, and I really am impressed with the amount of work that people are putting in. You know, thousands of hours are going into the courses now. So good job for everyone who's for sticking with it. So and I'm joined today with Juan is here as usual. Why don't you say hi, Juan?
Hi, everyone. Hope you guys had a great weekend. Excited to be here once again, and excited to be having a guest from BlackRock today.
Great. So today we have guests from BlackRock, and BlackRock is a you might not have heard of it before, but they are the largest investment management company, I think you call it, in the world. They manage over $8 trillion worth of money, and they have ownership positions of like Apple and Microsoft. They own like 6% of Apple and Microsoft, and just manage millions and tens of millions of retirement accounts for people, and so it's a really big organization and very important in our economy. And but they have a very I think one of the interesting things about them is going to be the learning about how software jobs play a role in what it is that they do, which I think is actually a very critical part of everything that they do. So we have three guests from BlackRock here, and maybe we can start with you, Jessica. You want to introduce yourself? And you're muted still. There you go.
Great, thanks, Mike. My name is Jessica Guan. I'm a product manager for BlackRock, managing investment software. As you heard Mike's introduction of BlackRock, so we are a finance company, investment management company, but we are also a technology company. And we are very proud of our technology culture, engineering culture, and being a pioneer in the financial industry to push forward with the best in-class technology. As the product manager, my role is to design software and to help our users, both at BlackRock and outside of BlackRock, to adopt technology to do their day-to-day work, make their day-to-day work more interesting, less manual work, and more kind of solving problems. So we are about 1,500 people strong at BlackRock technologists. And we have two of our best today, which I will pass it back to Mike and we'll get them introduced.
Yes. Okay. So we're joined today by Ajax and me, and why don't we? I would say Ajax I think has been at BlackRock for almost 20 years now. Is that right? And Ajax, why don't you introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you do?
Yes, it's been 20 years. Oh my God, that's a frightening number. I am a computer programmer for BlackRock, which is, as Jessica mentioned, something that people don't realize is that we sell software to other financial institutions. So we're very much trying to be the Google and the Apple of finance software. And a lot of people don't really understand what we do. So the way that I like to explain it is that we take ideas that people make on spreadsheets and then we turn them into software. That's basically the simplest answer for my type of computer programming that we do at BlackRock. We take something that's fragile, like an Excel spreadsheet, and we make it robust so that no one can break it and that it will be more resilient and work for a very long time on a very large scale.
Oh, that's cool. All right, and me, why don't you you've been at BlackRock only a couple years, I understand. So can
Yeah.
you introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so hi everybody. My name is Me, and I'm an analyst within the Aladdin Product Group at BlackRock. I've only been at BlackRock for 2 years, and currently I'm doing a rotational program, which means I'm jumping from departments to departments every 6 months within the Aladdin Product Group to get a sense of what each technology department within BlackRock does. Yeah, so happy to share my experience with everybody here today.
All right, that's great. So why don't we start off? I know you've mentioned a couple names of software like Aladdin, and I don't know who wants to kind of explain like what is Aladdin and how big of a program or system is Aladdin?
Ajax, you wanna take a step since you've been here for a while? I'm still trying to remember the acronyms.
Aladdin is the software that we sell to other financial institutions, and it's an umbrella. It's an application suite, kind of like Microsoft Office.
Like Office, okay.
Yeah, where you have different apps that do different things, but it's all packaged together, and all the apps interact with each other in different ways, or they can interact with each other in different ways.
Is it all like web-based? Is it now in terms of how clients would use that?
That's a great question, and everyone's excited about a web-based version of Aladdin. In fact, that's what a lot of us are working on now, but we originally built the platform in different groups using different technologies, but they're all sort of brought together from this one launch platform. So now we're slowly going through all of our applications and trying to make them more cohesive in a web product. But currently now they're all in Java, and we have some web products, but it kind of runs it all across the board depending on the use case. Okay,
so like you would write the Java, like a client is written in Java and then would be run on the desktop of your users.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And then the launcher is like a desktop app basically.
Okay, and then it talks to your backend systems to get data and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And Me, you work on something which is called alpha enhancement or alpha enabling technology. I saw that in your bio. Maybe I think for a little bit of explanation of what is alpha and how does that apply to the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so in investment term, there's like two great terms. There's like the most common, which is like alpha and beta. So beta is talking about like the volatility of the market. And alpha is referring to the active returns of a fund. So at BlackRock, we had passive investment funds. So they are funds that are set up to track a particular index, for example, the S&P 500. And when we talk about alpha and you see the number alpha is equal to 3, for example, that means that the fund is doing 3%, is having a return of 3% better than the index it is being set up to track.
I see, then the underlying index, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So what my team does is that as part of like a bigger team, like the Alpha Gen team, is building tools to basically help us make better investment decision in order to improve the returns of our funds.
All right, cool. So, so I guess that's a little abstract, I guess, in terms of like, I understand the goal. You know, how does one go about, you know, investing is such a complicated topic, I guess, you know, how do you find the best deals or whatever, you know, what are the best investments to be making and from a risk reward point of view? And I think Ajax, you have a mathematics too, so that comes into play as well.
You'd be surprised how little I use my mathematics degree.
Oh, really? Okay.
For computer programming, especially, the most important class I took was the logic class.
Okay.
Which was a short 1-semester class.
Like a philosophy class.
In logic, right? And gosh, I can't remember the words now, but that was probably the most important class I took in college, logic.
Okay.
So you have to build these control structures, and you have to know how to negate something efficiently without, you know, making a mistake. But in terms of investing, between alpha and beta. It sounds really confusing, but it's actually very simple. So people give us their money, and either they want us to just track the market and make as much money as the market could make, or they want to give us their money and they want us to do better than the market. And that's what the alpha generation is. It's all these ideas where we think, hey, we have an idea and we can beat the market because we've been looking at all this data, and we have very smart people working for us who have ideas about ways that they can beat the market by a little bit. So that's what the alpha gen team does. They're always looking for new ways to beat the market, which is a very tricky thing to do. And very often when you are beating the market, you can't beat it for that long because the market catches up to you. So then you have to think of new ideas to beat the market.
Right. And you have so much money under investment too. It just seems like putting all these strategies if you had a smaller pot of money, like you could find little niche strategies, but you have to come up with strategies that work. Putting $8 trillion at work, that seems really hard.
It's a little bit of money.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I guess to what degree is it kind of strikes me like how much is working on like back-end systems versus like front end and doing like facing work? Both work on both or
Oh boy, I lost your signal there for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are we working on front ends or back ends?
Yeah, I just wondered. Yeah, do you work on both, or just do you specialize? How does that work?
I think it's a little bit dependent on the team. There's a lot of team that does both, like both end development, because as we said before, like Aladdin is right now a desktop application, and all like the applications within it, you need somebody to work on the front end, which used to be like Java Swing, but people are moving towards more web-based front end. But then you still have to maintain the backend data. We have a lot of data that we like have contracted vendors that we like take the data from. A lot of like signals from the market that we subscribe to. So all the stuff we like still need to have people work like in the backend, like loading it into data storage, and then like taking the data from there for like analysis and all that stuff. So depending on the team, but I feel like most team is in a way usually like both end development, a full stacks basically.
BlackRock has an amazing rotating analyst program, which me is currently in the middle of, where they take new employees and they put them in every group for 6 months at a pop. So they really get a 360-degree view of what's happening from a technology standpoint at BlackRock, which is a wonderful opportunity that I was not given. So I've been sort of on this one path here where we see the whole company. But I've worked on back ends, I've worked on front ends. But what's great about working for a big company like BlackRock is we have like a data team. So all the data team does is deal with the data. They're pulling in stuff from different data sources, they're cleaning it, they're making sure it's right. There's a lot of checks and balances to make sure that when my team goes to make a portfolio management tool, that all the data is going to be in good shape and we don't have to worry about the quality of the data. So there's definitely a big advantage to having a company that's at a very large scale like BlackRock.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, and I guess I was wondering, like, in terms of, my typical thought of like, financial software, financial management or whatever, like you kind of see in the movies, you see like trading desks and people frenetically like, buying and selling, trading stocks and things like that. How much is trading involved in like supporting trading activities? Is that involved in your work, or are you looking at more like long-term value and things like that?
We support traders. A big part of our job is to deal with software problems that come up during the day. For example, there's certain times of the year when they're trading a lot more than they are at other times of the year.
Okay.
It puts a lot of stress on our systems. And we as developers have to be very attuned to that to see, the server that we built can't handle this load very well. How are we going to react to that during this time of the year when the traders are trying to execute hundreds of thousands of trades and
Interesting. Okay.
putting undue stress on our systems? So we do sort of work hand in hand with the traders. And the traders do have very stressful jobs, and they are working long hours all the time, and are responsible for all this money. And so effectively we are too. So we need to be right there for them.
So is there kind of a split between, like, asset allocation side? I think of kind of as a very cerebral side of, like, very calmly deciding this percentage of my portfolio should be in this sector and this percent should be in that sector. Just kind of having this long-term strategy, but then on the other side, the trading things are looking for price fluctuations that are going to be advantageous to take advantage of in the near term. Do you kind of support both those things in the software, or how does that work?
We do. Try to imagine anything you could think of that would be finance related, and we build software for it.
Oh, okay.
Everywhere from dividing up your portfolio, like you said, into asset allocations to executing trades and coming up with new ideas for alpha generation. That's
cool. Okay. Well, to kind of shift gears into kind of the software domain of things, it does strike me that I've worked on my history on software that was maybe 10 to 20 years old, and there's a lot of, like, what we would call legacy software in there, and then developers love to work on the new shiny thing. They don't like to be put on maintaining older code and stuff like that. I wonder if you can talk about your experience with how that works at your company with how do you deal with older software and the newer newer systems that people might want to work on.
I can go through that briefly. So as a rotational analyst, we are usually given a favor because they usually know that working on legacy code system takes like a while to like ramp up. Like you have to go through the code base. Yeah. So since we're only on a team for only 6 months, they usually give us something like a little bit more like interesting than like going through all the legacy code to learn it. Usually it's like a new project that the team is working on, because right now, as Ajax said before, a lot of teams are switching gears from like a desktop app to a web app. There's a lot of new initiatives going on at BlackRock, especially around like environment and sustainability, for example. So the analysts are usually put on those projects to help out with. Occasionally, like there's we like still have to learn about the legacy system as well and like assist in maintaining it. But I think most analysts don't have to like answer like support call, like why is this legacy application is not working yet. But yeah, that's something I think Ajax have to deal with more than I do. But yeah, there's like room for both at BlackRock right now. Like there's always like the legacy code system, and like there's like the legacy like algorithm that someone built like 20 years ago that we don't want to change because it has such a big root in our system that if you change that algorithm and it's wrong, it's like gonna impact our whole ecosystem. So that's probably something that I think will still be kept and maintained in the future. But there's a lot of like new initiatives, and I feel like for the 2 years that I've been at BlackRock, I also interned here the summer before that, and I think I've seen a lot of changes, not just in the code base, but like project-wise at BlackRock within the past 2 years. So yeah, it's an exciting space.
I have had to deal with a lot of legacy code, and I like to say, computer programming is like learning a foreign language. So first you need to learn the language as well as you can, but then when you're reading legacy code, it's like reading a novel in a foreign language that very often is not written very well. I mean, there's only a handful of great writers in the world.
Yeah.
There's only so many Nabokovs and can't think of any other famous novelists off the top of my head.
Hemingway's.
But most of them are, who are the bad writers in the world? Thank you. Anybody? Most of them are not as good. So it can be a real challenge to try to decipher what a piece of code is trying to do. But that's also how it can be fun, because you're problem solving all the time. It's like solving a puzzle. It's like reading the Rosetta Stone or something. It's like trying to figure out what someone wrote and what they were trying to say a long time ago.
Yeah. So in dealing with like maintaining code, like I always wonder about kind of the testing regimen or the testing standards. I worked at Microsoft for 20 years, and when I was there in the early days, like we had very little, actual automated testing at all, barely even any manual testing. Like developers would just kind of say, "Oh, looks good to me," and then we would think we were done. And that changed a lot. I worked at Google in my last job, but where testing was like such a refined task and expected of everybody. So I assume like Ajax, you've seen a similar evolution of like kind of the role of testing in software design. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
It's a lot like what you just said. In the old days, the developers would say, "Hey, looks good to me," and they were never as rigorous as they should have been. And then gradually we started to realize that testing was very important. So we would have a team, and we still do. We have teams of QA test people who do a lot of manual testing. But and we're also now very strictly enforcing automated tests for all the new code. So it's kind of been a long road to that place, but it couldn't be more important. And I'm so glad we're finally there, because the code is going to be so much better.
Have you ever had to wear a pager?
I'm sorry, you broke up. What was that?
Have you ever had to wear a pager?
No, but no.
Yeah. Be on call for. I think that's a big motivator for software developers. They get in the. If you're on, I can imagine there are people at BlackRock that are on call, like that have to respond like immediately to things, right? So.
We're lucky because we have we're global now, and we have employees all around the world. So we are on call 24 hours a day, but there's usually someone around the world who can handle it if we're sleeping.
Okay.
Which is not the case with the company that I was at before we were bought by BlackRock.
Oh,
so we would have to be woken up. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I assume it'd have to escalate pretty far up the chain before you would get woken up in the middle of the night.
That's right.
That's good. But that was always a big motivator, I think, for everyone I've worked with. Like, if you were on that pager, like you did not want to see those kind of critical bugs happening,
What's a pager? What's a pager?
Well, that's what we call it. Yeah. I think we still called it at Google, like wearing a pager, like even though you're obviously getting a text message on your phone from an app that's calling people. So I assume you know what a pager is, but me might not know what a pager is.
And I was thinking of the end scene of the Avengers when Thanos snapped everyone out. Yeah, and there was like a pager that they sent a page to Captain Marvel. That's what I was imagining when you're talking about that. An emergency.
Yeah. The early text messaging system, from back in the old days. So, all right. Let's see. So why don't we talk a little bit about kind of the technology stack that BlackRock. A lot of our students are doing kind of web front end technologies. There's some Python students. We also have PHP and some mobile application developers using Java and Flutter. I don't know if you've heard of Flutter, but kind of a cross-platform framework for building mobile apps. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the different technology stacks that are in common use at BlackRock now.
Yeah, I can go through my experience with like various team. So a lot of the applications and like the backend are in Java. So Java is definitely like very predominant in at BlackRock. And then in terms of web front end, I think a lot of teams at BlackRock use Angular. And here now then there's like React.
Yeah.
But yeah, Angular seems to still be the main web framework that we are using. And yeah, so then a lot of like our tools within BlackRock is also written in Java as well. Then there's Python as well for like our citizen developers who are like data analysts, for example, who wants to take a look at like the data pipeline and do like data analysis on it. For example, the current team that I am on, which is the BlackRock Text Analytics platform, we use like Python to like code most of our applications and tools because as you know, Python is now like the de facto like data analysis tool. So I think that's like the main tech stacks I have encountered. Ajax, any more interesting um, tech language?
That pretty much covers it. I heard someone say at BlackRock the other day that Python is the new Excel. Which I thought was very interesting. Made me stop and think, and that makes sense.
Yeah, I think if you have the tools for like being able to ingest the data that you want and be able to then kind of quickly come up with an answer from that data, that Python is really great for doing that. We did have a question on YouTube that asked about the data science pipelines and how many, like, are there a lot of data analysts, big data engineers, and things like that in working for the company?
Yeah, there's a huge team of data scientists at BlackRock. I was in fact in like a meeting between like developers and data scientists before this town hall, where we like exchange the ideas that the developers have thought of that would be helpful for the data scientists to use in their research. And then the data scientists can like chime in whether or not they like that idea, and they are also trying to like set up like a more formal pipeline for developers and data scientists to communicate with each other on like what each team need, or like what's some like great ideas that could be used by both team, like the developers could help the data scientists with, and like vice versa. So there's like a huge team of data scientists at BlackRock if you're interested in that. And yeah, they use Python for a lot of their work.
But it sounds like me that there's a line between the developers and the data scientists. Is that true?
In a way, yes. Just because of the structure of it, I think. Because there's like a whole team for like data scientists, and they do like a little bit of different trainings versus like developers, like we are. And a lot of the work that they do is more like they take in the data, they look at the data, and they analyze the data. And there's developers in the background building tools to help them doing that job. Because a lot of stuff is not just open source Python software, but a lot of like the tools are like the in-house BlackRock tools, like we have like our own like text analytics, voice to text tools as well. So that's what like the developer communities is bringing to the data scientists. I think we'll see a lot more like collaborations and much more communication in the future between the data scientists and the developers. But that's just also based on my experience for the past 2 months on the team. So I can't represent like the whole scope of that relationship yet.
So do you also have like user experience and designers, those kind of roles as well? That is another track I forgot to mention we have.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
We're now investing a lot into. We have a dedicated UX team now, which is new, and we're spending a lot of time on user experience and what's the expression? User joy.
Oh, okay.
User delight. User
Yeah.
delight. Putting a lot more focus on user delight. which is fun. There's a lot of research that goes into it too, which they're doing as well.
Yeah, I've sat in on a few of the lectures that our designers are giving, and it's not, it definitely has a lot of kind of human factors, trying to understand how people are thinking and design a thing that works best for real people. So yeah, I think both of you have in your backgrounds spent some time helping teach other software developers, and I wonder if you could talk about your experience, or maybe any any tips of wisdom for someone just getting into the field, just learning software development, about ways of being successful.
Sure. When I got hired at the company before it was bought by BlackRock, it was right at the tech boom. It was the year 2000. There was a big tech boom, and they were desperate for developers, and they hired me simply because I had a degree in math and had some computer programming experience. But they wanted me to write Java code, which I'd never done before. And they just said, "Oh, you're smart. You can figure it out." So they let me learn how to be a Java programmer on the job, which is pretty incredible, but also terrifying. I had no idea what to do. So I got a book, the O'Reilly book on Java, and I read it twice to try and learn it. And then I just started looking at legacy code and trying to figure out what it did. So, my advice is get a book. I don't know. I don't even. Yes, probably in a nutshell. Thank you.
Oh my God, this thing is so huge.
Get a book, read it twice, and then, I still have to learn new things all the time.
People still read books, I guess, or do they just learn everything online nowadays?
I think they're all online. But I still have to learn things all the time, and it always feels like the learning curve is like that. It always feels like when I'm trying to learn something new, I'm never going to figure it out. It looks so opaque. There's no way I'm going to figure this out. And so I just have to read the book and read the book and read the problem twice and work on it and work on it. And then one day, the door opens and you figure it out. So it's about being persistent and not giving up, and just knowing that, if it can be built, then it can be taken apart.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like a problem. It's like a puzzle, and you can't see the solution for a long time. But if you look at it long enough, the solution will present itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have this maybe a glorified notion of like, oh, I could never do that because it's just so, those developers have superpowers and they have a mind that is not like my mind. I can't figure it out. But when you get to work with other developers, they're all just people just like us, and they think very similarly. And we all had to incrementally kind of learn more and more. And once you get good at something, it does look like a superpower, but it's a path you can take.
Yeah.
Me, did you have any other advice?
So I also did tutor computer science back in college as well. So definitely people see people struggling a little bit when they first enter the realm, and they what is all these things are doing. I think I got a bit lucky because I started out with Python instead of Java to start on my career, because Python is in a way more human readable to people than Java. And one of the things that I found is the most useful when you're approaching computer science is that you have to systematically break down the problem onto what is this problem and how am I trying to solve it. So it's a lot about honing your problem solving skill, and less about I have to learn these whole new languages, because I feel once you learn how to solve a problem, learning the languages to do it is not as complicated per se. Just because you say there are books and there's a lot of online resources that you can always just Google or ask Stack Overflow how do I do this in this language. So to me, to get started with like computer science is a lot more like, how should I approach this problem? How can I like solve this with like a small framework? And you can get started like pseudocode usually, and say like, okay, this is what I wanted the program to do to solve this problem in like human language, and then you can translate those like steps into the code. So that's like the approach I think that really helps when I tutor people. Like, let's break down the problem. This is the problem. What are some steps that you can do to tackle this problem? How would that look in terms of like a pseudocode? And then you can translate that into the actual code.
Great. We had a question here, which was, how do you interview new candidates? What's the process for getting a job at BlackRock, and what paths are available?
I'm not part of hiring at all, so I can't really answer that question.
Oh, your group is not hiring?
No.
Okay.
But you might know because you were hired recently.
Yeah, so for the interview process, from what I remember, is that we have a coding interview. Like after you pass the resume round, there's a coding interview that you do virtually. If you pass it as well, then they usually have a super day in the office. I think they're doing it virtually this year because of COVID, but you go through 4 rounds of interviews, 2 technicals and 2 behavioral interviews. And yeah, in the technical interview, you sit down with like an interviewers. They usually work in the tech departments, and they'll be like asking you like technical questions to gauge like where you at on that level. And then there's a behavioral one just to see like how cooperative you are you a team players, and like what type of person you are and where you fit into BlackRock culture. So I think it's like a pretty typical interview process for
Yeah,
everybody.
it sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone had, I think, question about databases and languages being used in the backend part of things. Are there like products that people would recognize, or custom built databases? What are you guys using, if you can disclose it?
Gosh, I think we have a Sybase backend database still, but we also are running other NoSQL databases for other projects.
Okay. Yeah.
But most of the the hard data is in Sybase.
Okay.
Yeah.
A SQL database.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So learning SQL applies to lots of different backend databases, and
yeah, and I still have to write queries against it. So I have to work on my select statements and my where statements and my subqueries. It's like it seems like that will never change.
Yeah. I think I remember the day when I learned SQL pretty late in my career, or just doing some things for websites, and I remember the day when I wrote my first SQL query that actually took up almost a whole page for one query, and I was like, wow, like it's very difficult to read, but putting it together and and writing it, with all these nested queries, things like that. I don't know what's the longest query you've ever written, Ajax?
They're long, but thank goodness that we have DBAs who are brilliant, that I can send my queries to and say, is this okay, or am I going to break our database?
Yeah, that's true. Like a query can put the machine into, oh, your cat is very cute.
My cat loves computer programming. Show me you can go.
This is the surest way to end any Zoom conference, is to have pets come on screen. Very distracting. So let's see. Any other questions here?
Yeah, I do have some questions from.
Go ahead. Thanks, John.
Yeah. So she had 3 questions actually, but I think you already answered the first one regarding like the interview process. So I guess maybe the follow up is like, what do you typically look for in the candidates that work that you look to hire at BlackRock? And then The second question is, what are some of the upcoming trends in the industry and that you guys consider in developing your products? And then I guess last question is, what industry knowledge sources do you recommend finance and programming?
Yeah,
It's a
so in
lot.
terms of the first one, like Ajax said, we're not like HR, so it's not like and I don't think neither of us has been involved in like the interviewing a candidate process before. So we don't know in particular what they usually look for in a candidate. I assume like technical like competency is one of them. What I also assume is that being able to work well with a team is also another, and being like curious and willing to learn, because there's so much to learn at BlackRock, both on like the technical side and the financial side. So I would assume that's also another characteristic that they are looking for. But like again, don't like quote me on that when you're talking to your interviewer. What was the second questions again?
So what are some of the upcoming trends in the industry that are considered when developing a product?
Yeah, so one of the upcoming trend in the industry is that sustainable investing. So what BlackRock is incorporating into like our investment tools right now is something we call the ESG score, which is environmental, social, and governance score. That rate a portfolio based on like its holding and the companies within a portfolio's involvement in like environment, like how much carbon dioxide is producing, how many like female directors it has within its board, the diversity of its hiring, and like all like other criteria to take into account for sustainable investment. Ajax, is there any new trends within your group?
Uh, well, the big push towards web development, I think, is
Yeah.
obvious. Everybody wants web tools, so you just can't go wrong if you're putting all your eggs in that basket. But one thing that I would like to mention that hardly anybody ever talks about is if you want to be successful, even as a computer programmer, a lot of people think of a computer programmer as someone who can just sit in a corner and just do his computer programming and doesn't need really, it just needs to have these analytical skills in their mind. But one thing that people don't seem to ever talk about is their ability for intrapersonal communication. Because if you want to be successful in this role, you have to be effective at communicating your ideas to other people. So a lot of times people won't put an investment into learning how to communicate effectively, which means being able to talk in front of people, being able to talk in front of a group, be able to describe what your idea is succinctly and without a whole lot of extra information. It's definitely a skill, and it's something that can be practiced, and that I think too few people think about or think is necessary for their job.
Yeah, so communication is really key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think of the percentage of your day that I mean, even if you're not writing code 8 hours a day for sure, you know, it's like, you know, there's a lot of like thinking and like talking to your peers and working out problems, you know, beforehand, and you know, and you know,
if I have a great idea, I need to show someone what that idea is and how it works.
Yeah,
and that means I got to draw pictures. It means I have to learn how to say this out loud so that people can understand what is happening in this computer program that I've built. And so it really becomes a communication issue instead of a computer programming.
Yeah. That was
the last.
Oh, go ahead, Juan.
Yeah, the last question that she had was, what industry knowledge sources do you recommend? And that's for like finance and programs. That would be useful.
There's a lot of one of our mantras at BlackRock is to be a student of the markets. Everyone at BlackRock should be a student of the market. And I
Interesting.
think what that means is you just keep your ear to the ground and you want to read the finance pages of the newspaper. You want to know what's happening in the business sector around the world globally. So there's a lot of emphasis on that at BlackRock, in addition to all the technology stuff that you're supposed to learn.
I was just watching a video last night that Nassim Taleb is producing. Do you know him?
I do not.
Oh, he is. I forget the names of his, but he writes about mostly like risk analysis, and his central thesis is that most investors really underestimate the rare events, the power of the rare events to wipe out your position. Like a lot of traders will do strategies which have a lot of exposure to extreme swings in the market, and even though just to eke out a small percentage gain every year, and it's all great, and they're buying their Lamborghinis when the markets are doing great, but then they lose $1 billion for their company 1 year. So he writes a lot about that sort of philosophy of really understanding risk. So anyway,
do you know any resources learning resources that you need to pay attention to?
Yeah, no, I think we've been spoiled a little bit since we have at BlackRock what we call BlackRock Academies, which has like a lot of courses and like learning materials for us on both like the finance and the tech side. So there's a lot of time I can just like go in there to like get new information on something, and we also like have like BlackRock like daily like newsletter, where you can get a lot of information on how the market is doing, if there's like something that we have to be like wary of in the future. But I think in terms of like publicly available resources, I think Bloomberg is like a good financial news site that a lot of like my colleagues also follow. On the tech side, I feel like everybody just get their information on like the new technologies from like different random websites. So I don't think like there's like a cohesive source that I've seen anybody has on. The only thing I has is maybe TechCrunch, which is usually like on like a lot of like tech startup news.
Yeah.
So you can get like the latest tech trends on there possibly.
And I'm sure like Stack Overflow and things like that are, I assume, on most every programmer's second monitor or whatever.
Well, you mentioned earlier about superpowers.
Yeah.
If I have one superpower, it's how to use Google to solve my problems.
Yes.
How to use Google to fix what's broken.
Yeah, Google is great to type in error messages and get answers to things. A friend of mine has an old PDP-11. Like he's my age, and he's collected old computers. So I got on last night, and I was trying to write some programs on the PDP-11 in C, and I was getting error messages that like I didn't know how to solve it. And even though this is like a 1986 BSD Linux, I was able to find still some help on error messages coming out of the compiler. So even today, it was not as good as like modern programming languages, but it's still out there. So
yeah, it's an incredible resource that I wish I had when I was starting my career.
Yeah.
So I do have some questions from Kevin. So he was asking about one, are you using a web framework for the transition from the current applications to the web app? And then when a client signs up for your products, is it on a premise solution or a cloud-based architecture? And the last question is, which databases and languages are being used for the backend?
We kind of answered the database one, I think.
Yeah.
We are moving to the cloud. For a long time, we maintained our own data centers, and I think we're moving to start using cloud providers. That's the only answer I have for any of those questions, because I don't know the answers to the rest.
Okay. Okay, and then I guess Ilva has a question about does BlackRock hire directly or through third-party hires?
Like contracting or for IT and or other internal positions.
I know
think
we hire
usually directly.
contractors, but we do also hire contractors. If I've been involved with some products where some projects when they bring in short-term contractors, and a lot of time the contractors will become permanent employees too. So there's a lot of different ways in.
And you have an internship program as well?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, there's a summer internship programs that usually happens. It used to be in the office. I think they did it virtually for the last class. But yeah, it's like a pretty fun internship. Like they have a lot of like activities to get you used to both like the finance and the tech side of the company, and you get to work and do like projects with like interns across like different departments in the firm. So it's a really cool internship.
Cool. Yeah, I think I'm hearing kind of the theme of like being curious and really caring about like the business. It's not just the software development, but kind of caring about the underlying, goal of the organization. Like what is your goal? And like being curious about it, learning about it is really a big part of being a good, employee and being productive teammate member. We had one of our participants sent me a message that she had a job interview coming up, and so she asked me a question like, "What should I do to prepare?" And this was for a kind of a web developer, front end developer role, and I said, "Well, you should really. I think the best thing is, rather than just kind of boning up on technical questions." Go to their website, really make sure that you know it really well and you have some ideas about how to improve it and understand the structure. And she said, okay, well, I'll do that. And so she kind of did her research. And then when she had her interview, she said they were so impressed that she took the time. So there's so many people who just don't even necessarily take the time to research like what their employer's goals are and like why what are they looking for, what are they trying to do. And so she got a job offer from them. So she's just showing that interest and curiosity, and I think that goes a long way.
Totally agree. If you're going to interview at BlackRock, learn everything you can about BlackRock before you get into the interview.
Yeah you shouldn't say like Yeah, it is. I know I interviewed a lot of people at Microsoft, and it's pretty easy to know something about Microsoft, because it's a consumer facing, company. But surprisingly, like there are candidates who come through without a lot of knowledge about who it is they're talking to and what they're doing.
We have an amazing CEO whose name is Larry Fink, who has been saying a lot of great things about sustainability and diversity in the news. So there's a lot to read about in terms of BlackRock. A lot of people still haven't heard of us, which is strange because we are the world's largest asset manager. But for any potential candidates, there's a lot to read, and it's all interesting stuff.
Yeah, definitely like learn like what's the purpose of the company and like what's like the future that the company is moving towards when you like do your interviews, because it helps with like knowing a sense of like what you're applying for.
So in the beginning, Ajax, you spoke about like BlackRock being the Apple and Microsoft of the financial technology industry. So I guess my question then is, because when I think about Apple and Microsoft, they're very consumer facing in the way that they do business, but I've not really heard. In fact, I've ever heard about BlackRock when I joined Reskill Americans, and we started to have those conversations. So I guess maybe my question is, because it sounds more to me like you guys are more B2B than B2C. Are you guys making a transition, or are you already in the space and you're just trying to get more visible?
No, I think, we'll never be as will never be the household word that Apple and Google are, because just everybody is using those products every day. But for people who need financial software, we're going to be the Apple and Google for those people, which is a much smaller set of people. The average person is still probably not going to know about BlackRock unless they read about the amazing things that Larry Fink is saying in the news all the time about the future of the economy and how we're going to get to net zero carbon emissions and things like that, and the ways that a big financial behemoth can change the world. These are the things that the average person might read about BlackRock, that we are, trying to make a difference. But in terms of the software, it's really only going to be for other finance companies.
Yeah. So you're not going to be in the market to create any consumer-facing.
No, I don't think
product.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think like, the philosophically, like what is the role of financial institutions, and they do get sometimes kind of a bad name, or like, are they, the sucking value out of the economy at the expense of workers or whatever. I think that, financial markets and so on, that's kind of the brains of our society, like, deciding where resources go, when, and how do you make those decisions. And I do applaud your CEO for like saying like the answer isn't just near-term profits. Like there's a lot of long-term goals that people should be making decisions about, financial decisions, and where, what kind of companies to invest in, what they're doing. And yeah, I think it's interesting when a company like yours is a major holder of, can actually influence other companies, not only by your investments, but, probably, talking to the boards and knowing those people on the boards and things like that too.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been times when I wake up and I think, oh, wait a minute, am I the bad guy? Am I working for the bad guy? But, we're basically in charge of everybody's investment funds in the world. So if you have a job and you're saving for retirement, we're the people who are making sure that you're going to reach those goals.
Yeah.
So a lot of people forget about that when they think about, the people who get paid way too much money and the Wall Street bad guys.
Yeah.
There's definitely an element of that in BlackRock, but ultimately our goal is to make everybody's future better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And Ajax, I guess maybe my last question, because that's something also that you spoke about that I picked on, was like you guys have like distributed teams that work around the globe and around the talk. And I wanted to know like what are some of the challenges that, because again, like it's a beautiful thing, but on the other side you're gonna have like the pitfalls sometimes. So what are some of those challenges, and how do you work to like minimize them to the best?
Yeah, some of the challenges is I do have to stay up late to make phone calls to far-flung places in the world where people are working on different projects. But it's, being global is a really wonderful thing because, for my personal beliefs, as we become global, especially in the world of finance, we're bringing everybody up to the same level. And it's amazing to, our company also talks a lot about diversity, and having a global workforce really sends that home, and it's eye-opening for me and it's eye-opening for them, just how different people live and how they get their work done and how they have to communicate with each other. It's all, I don't want to sound like a tree hugger, but it's pretty wonderful experience to have a global team and to learn about different people and different cultures all the time, every day.
Is everyone going back into the office after COVID, or are some people going to remain remote workers? Do you think it's changed the way people work?
It'll probably be a hybrid model. Still too early to say.
Yeah. I feel like my friends still are still at Google. Like I feel like people maybe don't necessarily want to go back to just like going into the office 9 to 5 like they were before.
Yeah. And I think this is where the communication skill that Ajax mentioned earlier comes into play a lot, especially with like an international team. Sometimes when you work on something collaboratively, you kind of like have to like set aside tasks like that you can do within your time and like hand it over to the other team, especially like on support, for example. There's a lot of like handovers that have to happen, and that's when like you have to use your communication skill to say like, here are some of the problems, here are what I worked on, here's what you can help me with. So that's like where a lot of like the communication skill come into play. And I would say it's also really interesting to work with an international team. It's just because like sometimes they like offer perspective that you like don't necessarily already have on your team. So I would say like that's like a really cool thing. And I also like to learn about the culture on the side, like besides the job.
Oh yeah, that's cool. All right. Well, we're kind of hit our time limit for our town hall, and I don't want to take up too much of your time today, but again, thank you everyone, Jessica, Ajax, and me, and for joining us today. I feel like everyone has learned a lot about demystifying what's going on behind the scenes at BlackRock and what that kind of job can look like, and it sounds really super interesting. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks for having us.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone. I'm going to end the stream. Talk to you later.
Bye.